The global insurance industry is more than a market.
It's a movement powered by 3 million professionals around the world.
Together, we support communities as they rebuild after disaster.
Help businesses through risk and uncertainty.
Protect individuals as they plan for brighter futures.
This impact isn't possible without people.
That's why we attract, grow, and retain the very best talent.
Because when every voice is heard,
when every person feels they belong,
we don't just build careers.
We build a better tomorrow.
Belonging builds 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 tomorrow.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Lucie Balthazar. I'm Senior Strategy Manager at AXA XL and also member of the Zurich Dive-In Committee. So the Dive-In organization has chosen to explore this year the theme Belonging Builds Tomorrow, as you could see on the video. As a local Dive-In committee, this theme resonates deeply with our commitment to fostering supportive workplace. And so we decided to center our Zurich event on the vital theme of trust and psychological safety. We are lucky to welcome Dr. Bird today, who will explore in a keynote speech how trust and psychological safety serve as foundational elements in cultivating a sense of belonging and inclusion at work. Drawing on insight from neuroscience, hormones response, and the holistic impact on mind and body. Following his presentation, we will host a panel discussion to delve into how trust can act as a transformative superpower within the workplace, enhancing team cohesion, performance, and authentic leadership. So we look forward to an engaging and thought-provoking session. Thank you once again for your participation, and I leave the floor to Andrew Bissett to introduce our guest and Dr. Bird. And introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everybody. Andrew Bissett. I'm a property treaty underwriter at Sampo in Zurich. Happy to have everyone here. Welcome to those in person, for those online. For those here in person, please don't forget to turn off any kind of ringer on your phone so we don't disturb the event. Happy to have Dr. Bird here. He's a medical professional, background serving as a general practitioner in the UK, and has been an advisor to many global multinational organizations like the World Health Organization. In 2010, he was named as a member of the Order of the British Empire, an MBE, and he was appointed as an honorary professor at the University of Exeter in 2021. In 2010, he also set up his own company, Intelligent Health, an organization that focuses on a corporate side, but also building resilience and healthier, active communities. So happy to have him here and looking forward to the presentation.
Andrew and Lucy, a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of the dive-in. Yes, we're going to talk about belonging and trust and how vital it is. This is not something that we should be doing as an add-on because we feel we should do. This is something that's fundamental of how an organization should work. So I'm going to talk a bit about the neuroscience. But the real experts are going to be the panel that come afterwards. And we're going to have this panel discussion about how do we put all this into practice. So it's all very well having it about what is trust and belonging in the brain, but how do you actually then make it real in the real world? So I'm going to just go through this and understand where trust fits in. So we created this resilience matrix. It's a matrix which helps us understand how, as humans, we really see the world. And actually, I hate to say this, but we are animals, okay? We are animals. And we have to feel safe, like any animal in the animal kingdom. We have to feel valued because we have to reproduce. And therefore, if we feel valued, then we're going to be able to reproduce and find a mate. And we have to belong because humans have been particularly good at cooperation. So they're the three fundamental things. And then you've got the three domains of our lives, the people around us, ourselves, our purpose, and the place. And then you can then put some wording. So that's love and trust, and that's where we're going to be talking about. But you'll see this isn't in isolation. You can't just suddenly plant trust in an organization. It's part of a much bigger thing. We're going to be talking about respect, about valued, about listening to people, about the community of feeling you really belong in an organization, the agency of being told that get on with it, and we'll let you make perhaps a mistake, but we're going to trust you to get on with it. The values that have to be aligned, so the individual aligns with the values of the company. The secure, for psychological safety, which we hear about, and it's so important to get that and ready for the trust. The heritage, that's about the company's kind of history. And actually, we shouldn't underestimate, even if it's a new company, there's a past, there's a history that comes through, and everyone can feel it. And then in the kind of community, it's rootedness, but here it's that feeling of a belonging to that place, not just to the people, but it's the organizational place. And if we get all this right, then when you get the stressors, which we do in our work life, absolutely we need them, otherwise we wouldn't be motivated to do things. We get an acute stress response, utterly normal, and then you get what's called hypostasis at the end. You've learned from it, you've overcome it, you've done it, you feel better, you feel stronger, you feel more resilient at the end. And actually, that helps to create a high trust in an organization. Unfortunately, this doesn't sometimes work. So all of those things we've just talked about aren't often there. You don't feel safe, you don't feel valued, you don't feel listened to, the values don't align, you don't feel part of the community in your organization. And therefore, what does your body do? It goes into fight and flight. It doesn't feel safe anymore. And we start to see that acute stress, instead of going to this lovely place of hypostasis, as it's called, a better state, we now end up in something different, chronic stress. And our body is entirely different. So anyone in chronic stress here, if I did lots of measurements on you, you'd have different blood values, you'd have different blood pressures, you'd have different, all sorts of it. Your cells, right down to the mitochondria, would be different. Chronic stress is the scourge of society of today. Acute stress is okay, but when it gets to chronic stress, everything goes wrong. First of all, you get emotions when you're chronic stress, all protective, all completely normal. Of course, you've got to fear. You don't want to go back to that horrible thing that caused danger. The anxiety keeps you away from it. The loneliness is isolating yourself from perhaps dangerous people. The suspicion, the anger, they're all protective. And so is low trust. If you're in an unsafe world, you're going to not trust anyone. That is protection. That's your body doing exactly as it's meant to do. And what we have to remember is that when you get this low trust and you get this chronic stress, it's using up energy in your body. Your heart rate's going up, the cells change, as I mentioned, but the body's only got a finite amount of energy. So it starts to take it away from bits of the body that it doesn't think is important for survival. The frontal cortex, that's quite important in a workplace. That's how we work. So when we're under chronic stress, our productivity goes down. Chronic stress causes a whole host of things. You start to feel tired because your body's trying to conserve energy so that the fight and flight can keep going. I mean, there's all sorts of other things I could talk to you about, the immune system going up. So section 1 is we can't talk about trust in isolation. Trust is part of that whole system of trying to feel safe and valued and belonging. It fits in with all of this. So it's that firm belief in the reliability of something, so like a bridge, or someone. But what's important to remember is that trust doesn't come free. It comes with vulnerability. You have to make yourself vulnerable if you're going to have trust in an organization. You have to let someone do their job with the risk that they might get it wrong. You might have to give some information to someone without them stealing it and claiming it's their own. You have to work harder in the evening on the understanding you could be taken for a ride and everyone gives you their work and they don't do the evening work either. So there are lots of trade-offs where you're opening yourself to be vulnerable. So vulnerability is the cost of trust. It's a very important cost, but we have to put that in. And it's very easy sometimes to ignore that. Now, some of you have perhaps fallen in love. It may have been a long time ago, maybe going on at this very minute. I'm going to dash all your hopes of all that lovely poetry and all that lovely music that when it rolls there and that kind of feeling of butterflies, that basically it's a ratio of endorphin, serotonin, dopamine and oxytocin that all come together in exactly the right amount, like a recipe, and that creates love. But the hormone that's important is the oxytocin. And oxytocin is the hormone that creates trust. It's the one that bonds us together. And it's the most important one for a mother and child to connect together. But I've been talking about chronic stress because when you have chronic stress and your cortisol level, which is one of the hormones, goes up, oxytocin goes down. You cannot have cortisol and oxytocin both up. One goes up, the other goes down. The other goes up, the other one goes down. And that's because when cortisol goes up, you're in that chronic stress. You don't trust anyone. You're trying to protect yourself. So it's not just you get the whole company to be a trusting company. You're going to try and get people to feel less chronically stressed by helping them to feel safe. So the psychological safety and trust have to go hand in hand. And that's what we'll talk about a little bit in the panel when it comes through. So the other thing that goes on, we've got these mirror neurons, and they mimic what's going on with other people. So we tend to kind of copy what other people are doing. So when trust starts to drop in some people, it's infectious. It goes all around. And that's, again, the human being is very good at keeping people connected together. So I'm just going to give you an example here. Hands up. Sorry, the guys in the ether there, but hands up who's heard of the prisoner's dilemma and game theory? Yeah, a few of you had. The reason why this is important is because this actually gives you an idea of why in a company things can go wrong when you've lost the trust. So basically, you have two inmates who were kept separate. They've both committed a crime that is 1 year in prison. But the police think there's a second crime they committed, which would be an additional 2 years in prison, but they've got no evidence for it unless they admit to it. And of course, they're not going to admit to it unless there's a little bit of a kind of incentive to do that. So what they say is, look, if you admit to that second crime, we think you've, then if your mate doesn't admit, we'll let you off for free, and you won't even get that 1 year. And your mate will get 3 years. If both of you admit, then okay, you've admitted, so your penalty goes down a bit, you both get 2 years. If neither of you admit, we've got no evidence, so both of you do 1 year. Now you're thinking, hang on a sec, how am I going to trust my colleague not to drop me in it? Because if I admit to it and he doesn't, then I'm gonna, so if I don't admit to it and he does admit to it, then basically I'm going to be 3 years and he's going to go off. So he's got a good incentive, or she, to actually admit. If we both admit, then we're going to get 2 years. So what are you going to do? And it's all about the trust that we have for each other. Because actually, in the end, the best thing is to remain silent and trust the other person is also going to remain silent, and we've got that bond. But when you don't trust someone, the best thing is to admit. But actually, you're both going to be worse off. You can do a game as well by just doing 1, 2, 3 and put your hand up, and each of your fingers is £10, €10, and that's what you give to the other person. It's doubled when you give it to that person, and they are putting their hand up at the same time, and it's doubled what they give back. But do you always put £10 in there? Because if you don't give them anything and they give you £10, not only do you keep your £10, but you double what they've given you. Suddenly you get £30 and they get nothing. This is what's happening all the time when we're having conversations about trust. Because actually, if you've got a trusting organization and you always give out your money and you expect people to give back, the company will be a total of £40. If you do nothing because you don't trust anyone and you just keep your money, it won't multiply. So you only get a total of £20 in that company now instead of £40. And of course, if you snitch on someone and they get them to give you everything and then you run off with it, you've done really well, but they won't ever trust you again. And therefore, you'll be back again. This is game theory. This is about how companies and trust is important, because when we give and share and become vulnerable, we add value, more value than if we've done nothing at all. So I'll leave that slide there for when you're having those later. So these are just examples. And you can just read them. John, I trust you'll complete the work by the end of the month. Full stop, nothing else. And that person goes off autonomous to be able to do it. Oh, thanks, John, but I need a regular response from that email. I need proof. I need another John to look after things. Basically, I'm not trusting you to get it done. And I'm going to put all sorts of micro management constrictions around. I'm going to stay late for work in a low trust, in a high trust, in a low trust. What's the point of me staying late? Because nobody else does, and I'm going to be doing their work for them. Think of the prisoner's dilemma. I've got all these ideas I want to give. And if it's a high trust organization, those ideas are celebrated and brought up. And you multiply on them and they build and build. But in a low trust organization, you think those ideas are going to be stolen. And they're going to be glorified by your manager or someone else who pretend it's their idea. So you don't give anything. So nobody gives anything. So think of that £10, £20 business. Nobody gives everything. Everything goes down. And feeling safe as well. We know that trust has gone down. Trust has gone down really badly. And in the UK, when they first did the studies of it, 60% of the population felt that other people could be trusted. And that's gone down to 29%, almost halved. Now, we could say that we're going into this world of chronic stress. We've got the internet that's caused the problems of social media. We've got people who are isolated. We've got a whole problems of the world as well, and politics. But you've also got this sort of AI coming through now. People are feeling vulnerable. People don't feel safe anymore. People feel they don't quite belong, and we're disconnecting from nature, which is something else I'm thinking about. So when you've got that chronic stress going up, we know that trust goes down. Now, when we go into companies, we actually do a benchmarking test and do a question of every one of those grids, so that one of them is trust. And I was going to find out, are the lawyers, are the accountants, are the insurance company people, do they actually have less or more trust? You're all exactly the same. I was a bit sad. That would have been a great story to have had that, but you're don't look at that thing that you're a little tiny bit lower. It's not significant. My company, I feel very proud, thinking, whoa, we're really high. But when the CEO asks them to say, do you trust people? They're not going to say no. So I don't think I can be entirely convinced that that is a real one, or that I'd love to beg to differ. But it's quite useful to know that there are companies where you've got trust high and there are companies when you've got trust low. And those high trust companies have been shown to be up to 50% more productive. That is huge. you can see why now every single conversation, every single interaction you're having with each other is being multiplied and multiplied with more and more value. It's a really good book if you want to read that. It's got a lot of the facts and the figures, and Paul Zach's been working on this for years. You can see there's pretty impressive figures on that. But I think this is the most important. If you're trying to retain the best staff, you have to have a high trust organization. A low trust organization is not a nice place to be. And if you're good, you'll go somewhere else. And it shows that those people do stay. The other thing is how you do your work with other companies, and that intercompany trust that we'll talk about a bit on the panel. Warren Buffett, famously, he did this $23 billion deal, and it was a 2-hour meeting. He trusted Walmart would have everything in place, and he didn't question it. He'd worked with them before. And you can imagine the lawyers' fees. It's not a good slide to put up to a bunch of lawyers because they think, well, that's me out of a job for a long time. That is how trust works. Can you imagine the tax? Can you imagine what that would have been if it was 2 low trust organizations coming together to do that kind of deal? You'd have just huge amounts of due diligence and lawyers, and it would go on. So that's an exception, of course. And you do have to be sensible, but there is this ability of this low trust to high trust or high trust to low trust. And if you look at the Dow Jones index of those high trust organizations, they outperform everyone else. So the other thing we've talked about when we had that £10 or €10 and we were giving them and toing and froing was actually that you give ideas freely because you know that will multiply in a company. If you hold on to your idea, it will have a value, but it won't actually be able to multiply. So that the more trust, the more people give, the more people offer. They're making themselves vulnerable because that idea could be taken out. And it's this vulnerability that always comes with trust. And you only can be vulnerable when you feel safe and you can put that trust together. And I won't go through that. So how can we be trustworthy? How would someone view you? Okay, you ask your friends, ask your family. Well, when you ask people, these are the things that come up. That's not surprising, really, is it? Honesty has to be there. But it's more than just saying the right thing. It's being authentic. It's saying things that you really believe in. You're not just doing words. It's really what that person feels. There's an honesty about that person, which is more than just what they say, and it goes on. But transparency is so important. People know who you are. They know what your aspirations, they know your values. They know that there's nothing agenda underneath. There's no hidden agenda. There's no kind of ulterior motive. They're open. That's a hard thing to do when you're feeling insecure. But that's one of the things, and transparency makes you very vulnerable. That accountability that you're always there, you kind of are always open to what people are wanting to know about you. You're not evasive. That accountability is another really important one. And your ethics, people trust that you'll do the right thing. And I think on the ethics is those people who feel more insecure or more vulnerable. They're the new ones. Perhaps they've got some disability. Perhaps they're not going through a very good patch in their work at the moment and making some mistakes. But someone who's got the ethics, they will see through that and they'll do the right thing. That creates a real honesty because there's a consistency about that. And then the last one is this alliance that you will always be on the side of those around you. You will be there when they need you. We will be there when sometimes people are in need, but will you be there when they are in need at that point? It means you drop things in order to help that person. That's the tough bit. You're about to go into a meeting. One of your colleagues is in a dire straits. You can say, John, sorry, I'm going to see you later on, but I must go into my meeting. And that could be the right thing. but that could just be the one opportunity you've missed on something vital. So being there for someone when they need you, clearly there's some boundary, there's some balancing to do, is something where people feel safe, really safe, because they know that that person's gone out of their way to help you. So those are things, but we know inherently when we can trust someone. And we also know when we walk into a high trust organization, you don't have the directors little kind of cocooned up in there. They're walking around. You don't have this, don't do this or don't do that, the micromanagement, people not talking, no social, no activities that kind of bound people together. There are lots of things you notice. You're all sitting out isolated, slightly scared, not wanting to be yourself and terrified of making a fool of yourself or asking a wrong question. That is an organization where you can see that low trust. And all of us can get into that when we're under stress. That's the time when it's really tested. So I'm just going to end there with two types of leadership, because both of these are trusting, but they're slightly different. So effective trust is the trust that you get from your emotional brain. That's the leadership kind of trust. Someone who's got the charisma to lead an organization. They don't always worry about the detail, but somehow you would do anything for them. You would trust them that they will lead you to the right place. The army are very good at it, so politicians, and so are CEOs, and so your managers can be very good. And that effective trust, which is all based on that emotion, is often the most successful type of leadership. But we're not all blessed with that charisma. There's the cognitive trust. That's more with your co-workers. They're good at their job. They're reliable. They will do what you say they will do. They may not be the most charismatic people. They may not be able to lead you through, but you know you can rely on them to get something done because they're competent, they're reliable, they're honest. It's all measurable. Whereas this charismatic one can be a little bit more kind of softer, but both are needed. And often there are two different groups of people in companies that do it. And when you've got that leadership quality, whether it's a cognitive or an effective one, the other thing that has been shown to really work is this servant leadership. And we're going to discuss this because it's not always everyone's kind of view of what a leader should be like, that you should be actually very powerful and very strong and decisive and know what you're doing with you. And this is the way to do it. Whereas a servant leadership is allowed, but I've got a massive team here who I think do know, and I'm going to put my trust in you to deliver this because I don't know the answer. I'm your leader, but you're the ones who are going to help us through this. We're going to do this together. That's that servant leadership. And the key thing about that servant leadership is vulnerability. You could be exposed as being a fraud. You could feel that people will think they don't know what they're talking about, but you accept that because you know that it's a trust that you don't know the answer. Nobody knows the answer to that particular problem, but together we'll get it right. And you can see all these other things here, being very clear about what you're saying. So that's being transparent and being authentic, and you're making those mistakes, you admit them, you've got the authenticity, you've got the ethics as well, the integrity, and you're always allowing your team. Remember, in that box at the top middle is about agency. It's about allowing people to feel they've got control over their work, and that really, really helps there. And remember that when someone is in trouble, they don't normally book their trouble with you. Their trouble can happen at any time. A really good leader drops things to make sure something is done at that time and puts himself down. So we've got a real summary here. Chronic stress reduces trust. So you need to have an organization where chronic stress is wiped out, and that's psychological safety. The oxytocin will always go up when cortisol goes down. And then we can talk about the low trust organizations and how high trust with communication, with leadership, with consistency and relationships. And of course, we can pull this all into our own relationships of trust. And I would say there'd be one phrase I would always use about whether it's a relationship in work or a relationship at home is, I will be there for you when you need me. And that probably summarizes when you really know that there's a trusting organization. So thanks very much for listening on there. We have, as I say, lots more to come. We're going to have just a few questions if anyone's got some questions. And I think there is going to be a roving mic, and we can go through that. And we have a Slido. So if anyone has got any questions at all about the neuroscience or that, as I said, we are going to be talking about the application of this and how we deal with this in real life for our amazing panel. But up until now, if anyone's got any questions at all, please do. If not, we'll go straight into the panel.
Even better for the panel. I was wondering if you could say something, because of all the remote work, hybrid working, does this have any influence on the feeling of trust or belonging?
It does, and we will talk about that. You're absolutely right. I will put in my little bit, though, because it will save me doing it later, is that although remote working has opened up a kind of new community we probably didn't have before, there is that point where you meet someone face to face and the body language actually helps you trust them much more quickly than if you're just seeing them online. So there is evidence to show that body language, which you can't really get quite as much, does add some value, which is why it's always good to meet someone for the first time, and then you can do the online afterwards, because there's extra bits. And we learn this in general practice, that as you see the patient walking into your room, you almost can pick up what is wrong with them before they've even sat down, because of all the slight kind of ways they're using their body and face and how they express themselves, etc. But we will go into that, because I think that's an important point. But thank you for bringing that up. And I've said my bit now, so I won't need to say it then. Any other points?
So we do have a question on the Slido. So there are two questions that are actually quite similar. So I'm going to ask you both questions at the same time. So how do you restore trust in an organization if it's broken? And if people don't trust a leader, how can he work on it to get better at it? So like, how can you restore this trust in an organization?
Okay, that's going to be something we're also going to, now I'm going to ask the experts here to do that. But I think what I would say, the first thing is, if you're a manager or if you're a director, or even if you're got your colleagues, you start with yourself. Can people trust me? You have to make that vulnerability first. And that's why it's so hard to take that first step in an organization that's lost its trust, is because you have to become vulnerable in order for trust to come back. But in a low trust organization, being vulnerable is really, really risky, because you don't quite know how that's going to come back to you. So you have to accept that by being vulnerable, you may well actually get some of the disadvantages of that, but you have to start there. It's hard. An organization to a high trust needs very strong leadership, but it can be done from the bottom upwards as well. And each person has to make themselves more vulnerable. I think we're going to talk about that a lot more, because, as I say, experts here rather than me talking about that.
So I do have another question from the Slido. It seems to be quite personal, so I don't think that the panel is going to be discussing about that. But so the question is, I understand the importance of trust, but what do I do when I cannot trust a particular colleague? I feel like this person doesn't put effort to belong, earn trust. Okay. So as a general practitioner, what would you answer to this person? And thank you, by the way, for all your questions.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I think that is an important, and sometimes you can't get past that, but let's think why they haven't got trust. So we know that if they're really stressed, if they've got that chronic stress and they've got cortisol high, they're not going to be able to trust. They're on guard. They're pushing everyone away themselves. It's not their fault. They're not ill. They are just doing exactly what the brain is designed to do, is keep people away, not trust people, because they've been hurt or they've had a damage. And I don't know, that person may not have done, but usually there's some history where the body is now in a fight and flight, chronic stress, and pushing everyone away. Those awkward people we all know to work with, who are very prickly, a bit difficult, very sensitive, and you think, oh, it's so hard to work. They're doing what they're doing. So what you have to do is make them feel really safe. So you just put them in, you don't fight it back again or kind of roll the eyes type of thing. You make them feel safe. How can I make that person feel safe? What do they love? What do they enjoy? Do they like being told, how well done, fantastic? Or is that the worst thing you could do? So by getting to know that person and trying to get to know without it being a bit kind of, over the top, you will find that that person will eventually start to feel safe in your presence. And when they feel safe, that trust will start to come back again, and you may have that relationship. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's the usual dynamic of what's happened of when trust is lost. Either some event has happened between both of you where you've lost the trust because with the 10 points, they decided not to give you anything, and then you gave them everything, and now they won and you lost. Or it's something that is inherent in that person, and you have to find it, to work on it. And I'd say it's well worth working with those people who are difficult, who don't trust, to build them up again and make them feel that safety, because that's usually all that needs to happen.
Thank you. I think that we need to start the panel discussion.
Perfect. Thank you. So we get the panel up. So thank you for the questions. I'm going to introduce, or I'm not going to introduce the panel. The panel are going to introduce themselves. So starting with Katja, can you just explain who you are, where you're from, and what your role is?
Happy to do that. My name is Katja. I am responsible for all specialty and marine underwriting at AXA XL. I've been in that role for 4 years, originally from Germany, but living in Switzerland for long enough to have submitted my documents for citizenship.
Fantastic. Marco.
Yeah, so my name is Marco. I work for Swiss Re, and I'm also from Germany, but I haven't been here long enough yet. It's been only 2 years. So I started at Swiss Re 2 years ago. It was my first job after uni, and I recently changed roles, and I'm a property underwriter now for the Swiss market.
Martina.
Hello, my name is Martina GoeScke. I'm from SCORE. I'm the head of HR, looking after Zurich and Cologne. And I'm also German. I'm almost embarrassed to admit. So I don't know how we ended up here. I've been with SCORE for 7 years now.
And myself, so I'm the odd one out. I'm the Swiss one. So, so I'm a casualty treaty underwriter. I started also at Swiss Re, and now since 3 years, I'm actually at Sompo.
Excellent. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some questions which we have looked at beforehand, and then we're going to just have a kind of conversation. We probably won't have any questions during the kind of toing and froing, but maybe opportunity afterwards. Certainly there'll be afterwards as well. When we finished, we can, for those of you who are online, you won't have that opportunity, but we'll be able to do that. So I think we're going to start with the first questions we're coming through. And Katja, I'm going to ask you really, first of all, about what does trust mean to you?
To me, trust is the foundation that allows us to work effectively and to take risk. I mean, we work in an industry where we regularly face uncertainty and high stakes. So personally, trust gives me confidence, whether that's when I'm proposing a new idea or when I need to take a tough decision.
Fantastic. Martina.
Well, for me, it's about openness and transparency. It's about feeling that my counterpart has my best interest in mind, or the best interest of the project or the company or the relationship, whatever the contents might be. It's also a situation where I feel I can be myself. I can feel comfortable to ask questions or share my view without the fear of being reprimanded or ridiculed. It's a situation where I feel really comfortable and I share openly, whereas if there's a low trust situation, I would hold back. I would be uneasy, fearful.
Thierry.
For me, I think I would use the image more of a safety net, so more linking to what Katja said. So something that is there in the background if you really need it, and that enables you actually to take risk.
Yeah. Okay.
I think mine goes in a similar direction. So for me, it's really that I know that I can rely on people, and that I maybe also get the feeling that they can rely on me, be it about something about work or maybe in the private space as well. It's really living up to what the conversations you have, the promises you make, and just having that safety then.
So you've all mentioned about the kind of psychological safety what trust provides, and Martina, you mentioned about risk. Katja, you mentioned about bold as well. You can make bold decisions. Mm-hmm. Can you just elaborate on that? What you mean by how does high trust create boldness in our decisions?
I mean, it basically boils down to, when you take a bold decision, I mean, even the best prepared ones, well-intended ones, they can go wrong. So the thing is, if you can expect that somebody will have your back, then you can be bold, right? Because there won't be any repercussions, any blaming. And I guess that's what it boils down to for me, that failure culture and being able to make mistakes, to learn from them safely.
Yeah. And then Martina mentioned about risk, which is very similar, but you said, I can be who I am. Again, how do you mean by that?
I think it's similar in a way to what you said, right? That you feel that it's safe enough to share your views, to be who I am, and not worry about what others might say about it, and not think, oh, should I say it now? Should I say it? Yeah, maybe not. Maybe it's not the right time. But just say it out, and trust that people will enter into a discussion, perhaps, or say, all right, well, we disagree, but thanks for sharing.
And all relationships in here, if I go into my general practice bit when I'm talking about home relationships as well, it's the best relationships are when you can be completely yourself. That is a relationship, which means it's enhancing what you are, as opposed to you having to be constricted or treading on eggshells, as we say, and it's not right. So I'm going to go to the next one. Did you already experience a moment that boosted your trust in the organization? For example, when you joined a new company and instantly felt that you belonged there. Marco, you had some story here.
Yeah, so I experienced this in the most recent change, like changing to the new team. It was, and it's quite easy things. So it was my first day, and people were simply there. I mean, my line manager was there, the team was there. They welcomed me. They organized to have lunch with me. I had coffee chats with the people. So it's really those basics where I feel like they can already make the difference on the first day compared to whereas you start and maybe nobody's there. That's the worst option. But then it's also people telling you explicitly that you can come to them with anything, be it questions about the specific tasks or some team dynamics or whatever. I think just hearing that and people actually saying it can make a big difference, because on the first day or in the beginning, maybe you feel uneasy about it otherwise. And then it's always nice, I think, to get a bit from the team members, some insights into how the team dynamics work and things like that you otherwise have to find out anyway. But I feel like if this is shared with someone in the beginning, it always made me feel very welcomed and taken up by the team.
Thank you, Martina.
Well, I would like to share a story from the perspective of a new joiner. So at SCORE, we have made it a habit, or my team has made it a habit, to welcome new joiners on the first day at the reception. And one morning, I remember we were all sitting there in the reception waiting for the new joiner to come in. And I see him walk in, and I get up, I smile, I reach out my hand, I say, oh, here he is, welcome. And he hugged me. So I think that he felt like he belonged right from the start.
That's good. And different cultures, that might happen all the time, but in obviously an organisation that was not such a kind of common occurrence. But great that they could feel that so quickly and be quite happy about it. Thierry.
I think for me, that key moment where I really felt I belonged there for Sampori was actually even before I joined them. So it was the recruitment process. I still remember my boss called me up and said, hey, I have a position you might be interested in. Let's go and grab a coffee. And we talked for about an hour. We talked about everything, who he is, who I am, what I'm looking for. And he asked me a lot of questions. Okay, what is driving you? What are you looking for? And after that, he said, okay, it's fine. It would be good if you could come over for an afternoon to spend at Sompo and meet more people. So there I met the CEO, the chief underwriting officer, the head of actuarial. And all of those conversations were very similar. They just focused on, okay, who are you? What are you looking for? Where do you come from? And hey, this is what we have to offer. And what struck me throughout that process is just at no point there was somebody that tried to grill me or ask me technical questions. And I even pointed that out afterwards when I got the job to my boss and said like, okay, hey, but how come nobody asked me quite technical questions? And he said like, look, you worked 7 years at Swiss Re mostly as a casualty treaty underwriter. I can't possibly test your knowledge in 45 minutes. For us, it's much more important that we understand who you are, that you fit into the company, and that we are sure we can provide what you're looking for. And that I found really very inspiring, and it inspired a lot of trust in me, and it motivated me to give 100% from day one, just because I felt like, okay, they really trusted me. And the longer I've been with Sompo, I really see that they have this level of trust at every level, and it's a bit how we operate, and that I think is very nice. So.
And I think it's important to say when you were first approached, that could have been done from a script, but actually we talked about authentic, and you obviously gathered it there straight away that it was authentic, it was real, they felt it, there was the emotion behind it. It wasn't just a script of doing good practice. Is that
exactly? Is that already the setting to meet at a coffee, which is neutral? It was just, no CVs there lying around. I'll walk me through the CV. It was just him with his notepad sitting down and said, what do you want to drink? Tell me about yourself. So it was that approach where you really felt from the first moment, okay, that person is interested in getting to know me.
Yeah. And by the way, just because we will have probably some time as we're going along, particularly to individuals on the panel as well. I don't think you mind too much at the end. If they've said something that's prompted something in your mind you want to clarify or you want to add to some of the stories, then we'll just see how much we've got in time, but I'm pretty sure we'll have a few minutes at the end there. So don't go to sleep, definitely, but do keep awake and do think up your questions. So we've talked about trust being a really important factor, and I don't think there's any doubt now that we're saying this is not just a nice little veneer to go on top and then business carries on as usual. This is something that goes right through the DNA of a company. So why is trust so important in the workplace in your view, and how does it influence your engagement? And Katja, I think you had a lot to say here.
I would like to share recent experience with our underwriters. So in insurance in Switzerland, we're currently facing quite a tough market environment, with most of our lines of business seeing softening, so that is reducing rates. And so to prepare for the current renewal season, we have gathered our underwriters, and basically the key message being, we ask you to be bold and to take daring decisions. And that's, what we talked about earlier. That's exactly the thing. Bold decisions, they can go wrong. So what is absolutely crucial is for underwriters or team members in general, for them to feel safe. They need to know that we have got their back, especially when things don't go as planned. And that reminded me of a situation with one of the junior underwriters on my team. So they were tasked to execute a growth strategy. And that context, for the very first time, experienced a large loss. It didn't bother me for a second. I really didn't think much of it. I knew for a fact we had a solid business case. I knew they had adhered to all of the rules and guidelines. And after all, we're in the business of paying claims. So I really didn't ponder the situation much. So it took me a while to realize that to that person, it meant a whole deal. bothered them. They felt guilty. And that's when it struck me that actually there is times when it's not only about, obviously calmly and rationally going through rationales and analyzing risk profiles, but sometimes also it is about emotional support and being there for people and providing them with the support that they actually need in that situation, even if, for example, for us, we wouldn't need that to that extent. Yeah. So that to me was absolutely eye-opening.
And I think people be kind of saying, okay, yes, for you it was normal and that was what the insurance company is all about, but you were sensitive. You recognized that something wasn't quite right. How did you find that out?
So one of the things I do with my direct reports, but also any of the team members, I have one-to-ones. I have regular one-to-ones where I, catch up with them. First question always being, how are you doing? What's on the agenda right now? How do you do? And I mean, obviously, we also spend enough time. I mean, we spend more time with our colleagues than we do with the people at home. So we do get a sense for when things go well, and especially when they don't. And then also you also get to know over time whom can you probe a little bit more and maybe check in and say, look, I sense something is off.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to share? So that's one thing that I'd like to do.
And we said earlier when we were discussing this that there are people who we have a very different reaction. So we often see things through our own eyes, expecting everyone to be like ourselves, because that's very human. And we have to remember that some people are incredibly sensitive, some people are very vulnerable, some people are very tough. But I think what you're saying is by just talking to people, you start to pick that up.
Absolutely.
I think the communication is absolutely key, and understanding the different cultures as well. I had a situation recently as well where I thought I was giving someone the agency to help with a project, and it was very well, it was misconceived. They thought I was dumping work on them, and I wanted to give them some power and autonomy to help organize something. So I also, through the communication, then we found out that there was a misunderstanding. But if we hadn't talked, this would have stayed in the room for too long.
So you were trying to do the best thing you possibly could by giving them autonomy, and you giving them responsibility, and you thought they would be delighted and thinking, oh, at last I've been given this job, and then all they could think about is you've dumped all this load of work on them. And I think that is as you say, an honest mistake, but it's the after effects that's the important bit, because that could have actually damaged that relationship if it left, but you managed to keep that conversation going. Did they acknowledge that in the end and understand what you were trying to do?
Yes.
The conversation went well. Marco.
Can I ask Katja what you did specifically in that situation then with the junior underwriter? Was it simply done by you saying, oh no, it's not been a big deal for me, or was it more of a process in the end?
I mean, it was a process. I mean, obviously, if me trying to reassure the person, look, really, it's not a big deal, but going through the rationale that I laid out earlier, as in, look, I know that you've done everything right. I know that you didn't miss anything. So plus it is legitimate for us to pay claims. That really is the reason we're here for. So you obviously try with the rational arguments first, and then you see how far you get. Sometimes also it never is about rational things though. So then you let them speak and you ask questions. So why is it that you feel that way? And just let them, express all of their concerns and worries, and then you leave it at that at first, and then maybe you can catch up again next time. See, has it gone better? How can I help? And then, yeah.
Thierry,
getting back maybe on the trust in organization, I think
how does it influence your engagement as well?
Exactly. So I mean, for me as an underwriter, I think it is, I mean, we already alluded to, we are a bit in the trust business, which we throw around often and say it, but I really mean it. We sort of sell this safety net. And for that, I think to do it successfully, you have to have trust at every stage. And they're also a bit linking to what you mentioned with the Warren Buffett story. To do it efficiently, you need an immense amount of trust. So just as an example, a couple of years ago, for example, we had a very difficult renewal with one client where we received the submission data and we quickly realized, okay, we'll need to increase the price by around 40%. and that this is a number that we haven't seen in a very long time in that subsegment. So intuitively, you almost want to go back and double check the actuarial work. You want to double check the reserves that have been put up, but obviously you don't have time to do that. So there you need to have the trust between me and the actuaries, between me and claims to know, and even me and the data that the client provided to know, like, okay, no, that's what we're working with. So that's already like on the internal side, all the trusts that you need. But then you also need to deliver the message to the broker and the client. And there again, you need a tremendous amount of trust that they know, like if I say, okay, we need plus 40%, I'm not just shooting for the moon and try to see if it sticks, but there is really something going on, and then try to understand it more. And the same also from the client. So there, I think it's really underlying on every step what we do to have that trust, and it requires a lot of work and preparation. And then when we have the renewal moment, it's that key moment you want to be efficient and draw on that trust.
That absolutely resonates, and it's also feedback that we get from brokers as well. It's like, it's be predictable. And if you have bad news, deliver them on time, well ahead, so we can all sit together and find a solution. That fits brilliantly, yes.
And also the vulnerability that you went into that, trusting everyone else had done their job properly. So that 40% was a real 40%, and it wasn't, as you say. So you made yourself vulnerable by going there, because someone could have perhaps done something wrong, but you had that trust in all of them. And of course, they'll recognize that, which adds more trust, and trust breeds trust.
Hopefully.
So just on the, we all like to, we had one of the questions about how do you get an individual to trust? I'm not sure if I answered it particularly well, because I'm going to ask you a little bit. It goes alongside this. Other question is, what are you, in your view, are the main challenges and opportunities for building trust as a leader? But then I would like to kind of, perhaps, if you've got a kind of thought about how would you deal with someone who hasn't got that trust as well. But let's start with the leadership. What are the challenges and opportunities of trying to get that, building trust as a leader? And I'm just saying, when you've got that permanent chronic stress, it's really hard to trust other people. As much as you want to, your brain won't let you, because the oxytocin levels are rock bottom. And this is where you kind of think it's nobody's fault, really. This is just how it is, and we'd love to. And we've all gone through periods where we're feeling really, really stressed. And you'll notice that you might not stress, and you might not trust colleagues. It may even be at home you don't trust your family or spouse or someone. So this is normal, and this happens when we're stressed, which is why it's so damaging to all of us there. And you can see an individual, and I haven't done it there, but when someone's got chronic stress, they look different. They don't normally make eye contact. Their head's down. They're protecting their neck, by the way. That's why, because obviously that's a weak part. So you tend to have your head down. You furrow your brow because that's protecting your eyes. So you hear different things. You see different things. You are a completely different person, and you're basically telling someone, keep away from me, because I'm dangerous. I don't trust anyone around here. So it is all normal, but it's something we have to put up with every day when we're talking and reading people's views. So that would be my kind of thing of an opportunity, that there's always this dynamic where someone actually might be going through a difficult time and suddenly the trust will change. But I think where the challenges is a leadership, where would you say we've got there? Martina?
Well, I think before I go into the challenges, I think I want to maybe highlight a few more opportunities, because I think, as you said, oxytocin is the foundation for trust. For me as HR manager, I try to really help employees to come together and socialize. I think connecting with other people, I think that is really one way of, at least in my world, to spike the oxytocin level. So helping people to come together through social events. We organize happy hours. We have lunch lotteries. Any opportunity where people get to meet, get to know each other a little bit better, build a relationship with people that they don't work together on a regular basis. I think that is, to me, really key. I think some people will say, well, we're here to work and we're not here to drink beer and have fun. But I really am a strong believer. Employee-run committees where people come around common interest. I think that's another opportunity to meet people outside of their day-to-day work. And for me, that's the foundation of building trust. Another thing where I would say it's an opportunity is to give employees discretion about how they perform their work. I think ideally you would assign tasks around skills and interests. And I spend a lot of time with my team on sharing my philosophy around HR management, how we want to show up as an HR team, how we want our employees to perceive us as a team, and very little about the details of the job, the mechanics of how to do the job. And then the employees, my team, they are free then to decide with that framework in mind, with my values, the philosophy around HR management, they can then decide how they're going to execute flexibility and this autonomy to then decide how to actually get the work done is also building trust in the team, and I think increases also their happiness and well-being at work. And then this the last point maybe that I would like to make, and that's maybe also a challenge, is I think it's an opportunity as a leader to show vulnerability. I'm a senior HR leader, but I do not have all the answers, and I think admitting that you don't have all the answers and feeling the courage to also ask for help, I think helps with building my credibility, but also the trust with the team. But we can maybe go into that topic a little bit more, because I think in our pre-discussions, we've talked a lot about vulnerability and whether that's helping to build trust or actually reducing trust.
So Thierry, we've got Martina, a very senior HR leader who doesn't know what she's doing, and she's admitting that to her colleagues, etc. And we're saying that's good because that's servant leadership. But you might think, well, hang on a sec, she's being paid a very good salary. Surely she should be definite and strong and know exactly what she's doing.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it already. I think there's a bit of a risk. I think obviously, intuitively, I think we look up to senior leaders. We sort of almost expect them to have all the answers. And I think if they don't, or if they promise something that they can't deliver, the first time around, maybe not much happens. But if it's a recurring thing, I think then you start eroding trust. And I think that's a bit the thin balance sometimes, showing vulnerability and admitting mistakes. But on the other hand, you risk also that eventually maybe people start challenging you and say, like, as you said, maybe why are you the senior since you always don't have the answer? So I think that's a bit the risk. But on the other hand, I agree also. Small acts of showing vulnerability can also build trust. And I always have to think back my first job after New Year's, the CEO came down to the floors and would for half a day just walk the floor and shake the hands of everyone and wish them Happy New Year. It's very simple, but it's like just him getting out of his top executive floor and showing and being vulnerable. And I think that really also inspired a bit of trust in the organization and in him as well as a leader.
And I agree. I think if I stand in front of my team and say, in the spirit of openness and transparency, I'm going to have a confession to make. I have no clue about HR management. I don't think that's going to build trust, right? But if I perhaps say I'm really struggling to find use cases for AI in the HR admin work, and I ask one of my maybe technically savvy employees, I think she will be very happy also to share her knowledge. And I think that builds a different relationship also between my team members and myself by her being able to help me with something. But then maybe I go one step further. If I then go to my boss and say, hey, look at me, I've just come up with this incredible idea of how to cut our admin in half with the help of AI, I think that trust that I just created with my coworker or my colleague is broken in a second.
But you are bringing the best out of people. That's what you're doing by not sometimes always having the answers, because you're letting other people come up with those answers and feeling that they've got some control and they've got some autonomy, and that is about building them up. But when it really comes to the point when there's a crisis, that would change, and then.
If I might just pick up on one part you said, I think, which is important and makes for me the difference, is also the personal note you said. Approaching actually someone who said, as you said, is like, I know you're tech savvy. Can you help me? So there, I think the distance also always plays a role. If you have a very, very senior leader that you hardly ever see, that admits mistakes, I think you're maybe a bit more skeptical than if you work on an almost daily basis with you and you admit a mistake. I think that also sometimes makes a difference.
Marco, you're coming into the industry kind of, for most of us, not saying fresh face because you've been in it some time. So you're looking up to these amazing leaders. Tell us about what your experience is. And
I think it was very, very fair points that you mentioned. And I think that there is some level to it where you say, okay, should the head of HR or the CEO at a town hall where they speak to all the employees admit vulnerability, be it in a private sense or in how much you actually know about HR management? Probably there is a limit to it, but then I've made the experience that it really changes when you go down to the working level, where it's like, let's say me and my colleagues or me and my line manager, and at a prior company I've had the I know it all manager, and it was actually like in the beginning maybe you trust them and you think, okay, what they say is must be correct, but then over time you find out that they always fail to admit when they've made a mistake, when they never even raised that they might be uncertain about something. And then this really, I felt like for the whole team, it eroded the trust and it eroded the motivation, because it was always a very fluctuating process as well. Like working on something, they always change their opinion, change their mind. Whereas now I made the experience that my current line manager, he's quite open in both ways. So he would share with us maybe when he has stuff going on in his private life, which all of us do, which even the CEO of whatever company does. But then in this context of the team and where you're actually trying to pull on one string and work together, this can make all the difference. That if your leader or your line manager shows that, okay, maybe I have a lot going on in my private life this week or at the moment, and I rely more on you to take over a bigger part. I felt like this really always brings people together and increases trust. And also stuff like you mentioned, when you're when you're not, that you're not the most tech savvy person and you struggle with this specific topic, I think exactly then is the moment where you should show that that vulnerability and approach the team and kind of like involve them. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone got any questions you want to put up about this particular topic, about leadership, etc.? I'm just thinking if there's anyone who wants to do that. But as I say, for those on the Slido, do put your questions in so that we can have them at the end. But if there's anyone who wants to kind of just come in on them, but we can come in at the end. Because we're now going to go through the next question, which actually came up a bit earlier on, and that's about remote working. But also the so is there a let's go back. In a global organization, you're all separate in different offices elsewhere. You're probably never going to meet some of your co-workers. So how do you build trust virtually? And can it replace that kind of one-to-one, face-to-face work when it used to be in one office? Martina, tell us this answer.
Well, I believe that, of course, face-to-face interactions are very important. I said that earlier, that I like to bring people together around common interests or simply to have a beer after work. But I also believe that the hybrid work environment and the technology that we use today with the Teams video calls, for example, or Teams chat, or even WhatsApp chat groups, that you can build relationships also, or trust with remote colleagues. I think we've all met a colleague's cat or a dog that ran through the screen, or children that pop up, or a piece of art that catches your eye. We talked about my vase in the background of my home office that I bought in Venice, and has created lots of interesting conversations with colleagues. So you do get to know your colleagues in a different way, because you meet or you see them in their home office environment, and you discover things about them, or even in their holiday homes, and it sparks conversations that you would not have had in the office. So we also use the Teams chat, for example, to share a picture of the weekend, or when we come back from vacation, a holiday picture. And I think all of these things that really have helped to get to know each other in a new way. And so I believe that it has created trust also in remote teams.
And that's actually a really positive way of looking at it, because I think we all can think of the downsides of it. But actually, when you think in the past, if it's a global organization, it would have been a telephone, or wouldn't even probably even heard their voices, let alone seen their cats or their dogs or whatever. Thierry.
I mean, I agree. In the end, we're in a global industry, and we work all for global companies. Virtual work is essential, and I think you can build trust, but I think, as you mentioned with the example, I think there has to be already a certain level of trust that people feel comfortable actually sharing those vulnerabilities, meaning, okay, I don't maybe put a neutral background all the time. I have actually maybe my library or whatever, or I sit on the balcony. I think that there you need to have already a base of trust, and to create that base of trust, I think in-person contact, it really is a great way just to boost that trust and get it very efficiently. So this year we were very lucky on the reinsurance side. We all got together worldwide, 200 people, and had 4 days where we spent together, and there was presentations and everything. But the main aim of those 4 days together was just that we get to know each other and that we build that trust. And I think that was a big investment from the company, but I really see also a big benefit, because that just boosts that trust and gets you to another level, because you just don't hesitate to pick up the phone now that you met a person, that you understand where they're coming from, what their background is. And so, as much as I agree, we need virtual work, we can build trust over virtual work. I think it requires a bit more effort, as you say, and actually doing that step and showing vulnerabilities, which in the in-person world, it comes more natural and easy, maybe.
No, and I agree. And I think that's probably also the reason why many companies have come up now with some sort of a hybrid work model, where they request employees to work 2 or 3 days in the office rather than fully remote. So, yes.
You were mentioning making an effort, and actually it does take, a conscious effort to, ping someone if you don't have a business topic to discuss. I mean, just for, how are you doing? Is everything fine? How was your weekend? It takes a conscious effort, because if you're in the office, you just bump into people naturally. You sit in your team zone. Obviously, you meet your own team members, but also we have a large coffee zone, which is fantastic, right? I mean, the perks of having a large open space office, you bump into people. You naturally come into contact, and you can discuss, topics of business. Yeah. And at least personally, it requires me a conscious effort to actually stay in touch with people virtually, besides the business context.
One of our staff came up with the kind of it was almost like going back to primary school with show and tell, and I thought, oh, this is going to be so embarrassing. As a way of getting to know each other on a Friday morning, which you always try and do something on a Friday morning. But actually, it was brilliant. It was just one color brings something in your room of one color, so everyone brings something red. And I found out that there was a Formula One Ferrari, an expert in our midst, so I never knew. And he was so passionate, never had the chance to speak about it. Very shy person, but that was his great thing. And I got to know more about the staff than this ridiculous game of just having something yellow, something blue, something red. It only took about 10 minutes to get through the whole lot. And I think we learned more about each other. So there are sometimes you have to make yourself vulnerable.
If we do the color wheel, once you're done, you start from the beginning.
Yeah, that's exactly.
My favorite moment was when I was on the phone with my boss, and all of a sudden this tiny hand and a tiny pink teacup came into to her mouth. And I mean, at first I learned that she had children, and then she shared with me some struggles of managing both work and home life, and we had a personal conversation about that. So I never forget that little pink teacup that came into view.
Thank you. So we're coming on to the end. I've got second to last questions about the generations, and I know that the dive-in last year was about the different generations. How is that working? I think, and I came up with kind of thinking, well, this is a big issue, but actually, as you talk about it, you realize it's not just the generation; it's other things. We're almost having to learn how to deal with people who are not like us. You know, it's very easy to deal with someone you've got the same likes. You can almost predict the same, the house, the cars, you know, the interests, the holidays, and everything. And then you're dealing with sometimes people who've got completely different culture, particularly in a global organization. And we have to work a bit harder, and the differences can actually add. But is the generation still the biggest problem, or is it other things? Marco, what do you think?
So what I realized that at Swiss Re we have this employee resource group which is called Next Gen, and it's not exclusive, but it ends up being mostly younger people that just started maybe at the company, and we have regular events, like we meet for drinks once a month, and I felt like this is kind of like a good first place for people that join the company to make friends or meet colleagues and get this first connection. It feels like a bit of a safe harbor for people to come to. But then on the job, I feel like it's not really about the generation or the age difference. Some of my best colleagues, I feel like, maybe are more of the older generation, but these are the ones that I can rely upon, that I can trust, that I have a good working relationship with. And it doesn't, to me, at least personally, it's not influenced by age that much. It's more about the shared values and ways of working that we have.
So how do you, just on that then, how do you actually get over those different cultural or perhaps different values? Someone who really is not like you at all. In fact, you don't agree with their politics, you don't agree with there are lots of differences. How do you kind of, you've got to work, you've got to trust each other, you've got to keep going. How would you see you working on that relationship?
I would say it's getting to know the person. And I feel like almost with everyone, you have something in common that you can first talk about and get some sort of connection. But with some people, it's maybe obvious because you bump into each other in the morning, both on your bikes. So maybe you talk about that and that this is your hobby or something like this. And with others, maybe it takes a bit longer to get this connection, and maybe a common theme or whatever is the link then in the end. But it requires spending some time together outside of the maybe talking about this deal. So some private conversations.
Right at the beginning of this, we were just saying, I can't remember if you said, Martina, what are we doing all this social stuff? We're here to work. We realise that actually the social aspect is absolutely essential, isn't it? For building trust and for building a working relationship so we can actually connect. Katja, what's your thought?
I absolutely agree with Marco. It is the commonalities and the shared values that are absolutely crucial for teams. If I look to today's workplaces, we're so incredibly diverse, not only in terms of age or gender, education, cultural background, family situation, oftentimes not even working out of the same office. So while it is essential for everyone to feel safe to bring their own true self to work, it is at least as crucial that we find common ground, especially if we are so diverse. It is those common goals, common values that allow for us to connect and collaborate.
And as humans, we tend to, when we're feeling insecure, we tend to congregate around those we know, and we clique, and we get that little clique in offices. We all know it, that happens. How would you kind of disperse that clique without it appearing to be kind of, judgmental? That how would you deal with the naturalness of going into cliques, or because then you've got new people, different values, as you say?
I mean, it's making a conscious effort of, bringing people together exactly avoiding those clique behaviors. And it can be also simple things that, feel a bit fuzzy, feely, when you take over, a new team, or when you come together as a new team, to do things like what was our team charter? What are actually our common values and goals? Which sometimes feels a bit almost out of place, because some of these things, they come so natural, right? I mean, providing feedback, being honest with one another. I mean, it almost feels embarrassing to be having to write that down. But actually, if you come together with different people with different backgrounds, actually that can be helpful.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any thoughts about that? Because we're coming to the last question, which is going to be the tips as well for how we kind of go forward. So do you have a tip for the audience here? What can we all do? And we're hoping to get some feedback, which I keep saying, to help build trust in our organization. Martina, I'm going to start with you.
So I think my tip, this is an easy one, is make new friends at work. You can start doing that tomorrow. Reach out to that person that you have seen near the coffee machine or in the elevator, and that you have to this day not met or introduced yourself to. I think that's really a key. Also, attend social events that your company is organizing. Really get to know other people in the organization. I think increasing your network at work is not only helping your career because you have a better network. It's also a lot more fun, and I think then you will contribute to building a trusting organization and culture.
Thank you, Katja. What's your tip?
Stay curious. Ask questions and try to put yourselves in other people's shoes and then grasp different perspectives.
Fantastic. Okay.
I would say be yourself, like bring your great character to work. This industry can feel a bit, I don't know, old, and you have all these fancy buildings, and I don't know, sometimes it's the opposite of a startup environment, right? So I think it's even more important that you bring your great character to work, bring your humor, and encourage others to be themselves as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I can only build on that, and take the time to get to know people, ask questions, try to understand where they're coming from and who they are.
That's wonderful. That's great. So we have got a bit of time. So if anyone has got any questions there, you've been very patient. You've been sitting there very quietly. Anything you want to comment on what has been said? We had two areas where there was a slight kind of pushback. One of them was about the leadership, where people felt that leadership should be kind of servant leadership, but that could be misconstrued as people perhaps not being strong leaders, and therefore could be kind of both a negative and a positive. And I think that would be just something I'd love to know a little bit more about what you're saying. I mean, I think the other area is the values that people have of difference. It has always been put into this sort of the age war, that it's a generational war, that the older generation don't understand the younger, and the younger don't understand the older, and it's always there. And actually what we've realized is it's a lot wider than that. So anyone got any questions at all, any comments? Please say something, and then we can just do that. But if not, yes, you've got one question there.
Would be just to I can hear it, thank you. And it would be just to if you see that if you feel that something is missing in your organization, then try to be one of the people who brings it in. So we all know that quote, be the change that you want to see in the world. So it's the same for our organizations, that you can also bring up change, and you don't have necessarily to wait for your leaders to do it. If you feel that something has to be done, then go and do it.
That's such an important point, that we can always wait, let the management sort it out, or let the leaders sort it out, and actually nothing gets done because we're all equal in a way that we can offer. Any kind of experiences on that where you kind of feel that there's always been that inertia of waiting for something to happen, actually when we can do it ourselves, and it doesn't have to be someone experienced, Marco. It could be someone just coming in, seeing a gap and getting on with it. Any thoughts?
I mean, my manager, he knows as well, and he says that he's not the best in like thinking about when we could go for dinner again with the team or for drinks and all this. So it's just, he said, oh, maybe you guys should do it. And the whole team took it up. And now we are the proactive ones, and we don't wait for him to say, oh, we should have a team dinner again anytime soon. But it's actually us saying, we think it's time again, and we should do something together. And it's those small things sometimes that can make the difference.
Yeah,
we also have a young professional network, and they are also very proactive, and they come up with new ideas. In the beginning, it was mostly around social events, but now they are also coming up with an academy. They're organizing trainings. They're asking for what they need. And maybe I think we're now really running out of time, and I have to hand over to Andrew. But one thing that came to mind when I heard your question is also what I wanted to add is assume positive intent. I think that's also what we can do. Don't immediately jump to a conclusion if you hear someone say something, but really ask questions, assume that they mean well, and try to get to the bottom of it. I think that's also something that I would like to maybe give as a tip.
Thank you very much, Martina. And I think we are going to have to finish now. Or have we got time? Andrew, you able to wrap it up for us?
We had some learning objectives at the beginning that we wanted to focus on, and it was, first of all, to define trust, and I think we did a great job of that. Explain the link between trust and health. Again, fully covered that. Understand the impact of trust on performance, engagement, and retention. We also had lots of discussion about that, and then also highlight the ways to strengthen trust. And I think everyone, especially in the last question, answered that in a complete way. I want to send a big thank you to Dr. Bird and the presentation. I want to thank all of the panelists for their great contribution. I also want to say thank you to the team, the organizing committee here in Zurich for Dive In, especially Amina and Lucy for doing so much work and support. This wouldn't have happened without you, so thanks again. As a final thank you to everyone here. Please join us for the apéro afterwards upstairs and continue the conversations. And thanks to everybody online as well. Enjoy the evening.